Tell me what the goddamn story is, because that's what counts. And I think, without maybe knowing it at the time.
In an emotional moment, American star Robert Redford made a very shocking confession about the love of his life. Redford has starred in several iconic roles and was known for his reserved personality until this emotional confession. The confession involves a woman who has long held a space in his heart, and it reveals a story of heartbreak, romance, and a part of the legendary actor no one knew even existed. What is the mystery love story? And would it change all we thought we knew about Robert Redford? Join us as we uncover the full story. The complicated heart of a Hollywood legend. We all know Robert Redford, the Sundance Kid, the golden boy of Hollywood. For over 60 years, he was the picture of cool charm, rugged good looks, effortless talent. Redford looked like the kind of man who didn't have to try hard to shine. He just did, excelling through iconic roles in movies like The Way We Were, Out of Africa, Butch Cassidy, amongst others. To the world, Redford looked like he had it all, from fame to talent to women, awards. You name it. But beneath the layers behind that iconic smile, you'd find something else entirely. It was a man searching, a man struggling beneath the facade of magazines and stage lights. A man with a heart far more complicated than we saw in any of his movie roles. Because while he played the perfect leading man on screen, off screen, his life wasn't that tidy, especially when it came to love. Although Redford pursued his dreams in the acting industry so much, he didn't want the playboy life, neither was he chasing flings or headlines. What he really wanted was something solid, a home, a family. But sadly, the pressure of climbing to stardom and having the world know you doesn't let you have both, at least, not easily. Let's go back in time so as to understand the real story behind Redford's true love and how everything changed. Back to where it all started, before Butch Cassidy or The Sting. In 1957, a raw, unknown 20-year-old Robert Redford met a girl, Lola von Wagenen. Lola, who was just 17, was living in the same apartment building as Redford. Both young hearts instantly connected, marking the beginning of something romantic and true for Redford. There were no flashing cameras, no fancy premieres. They both fell in love so quickly, they eloped. Holding a formal Mormon wedding 1958 at Provo, Utah, Lola became not just his wife, but became his compass and his constant. In those early days, they lived modestly, sometimes paycheck to paycheck, long before the mansions and magazine covers. While Redford worked odd jobs and chased auditions, Lola supported him. She constantly reminded him of who he was whenever he doubted himself. Then came children. They had 4 in total, although heartbreak marked the start of their parenthood journey. Just months after the joyful arrival of their first child, Scott Anthony Redford, in 1959, they had their first child who died just months after birth due to sudden infant death syndrome. The loss of their son was a wound time could never fully heal. The pain only grew quieter with time. Regardless, Lola and Redford still held on strong and stayed through the painful loss together. Redford later admitted that losing Scott changed him forever and put a crack in the foundation of their hearts. That season made him question everything, including life, faith, and purpose. But life didn't pause. He kept moving forward, and they had more children together. Shauna Jean Redford, born 1960, David James on May 2, 1962, and Army Hard Redford on October 22, 1970. Also, his career began to rise, slowly at first, then like a rocket. By the mid-1960s, Redford was a name people recognized. By the 70s, he was already a superstar. But such stardom didn't come without a price. It came with pressure because suddenly, every move he made was public. Every glance and every interaction with a woman made headlines. The media didn't care that he was married, but cared more about selling stories. And Robert Redford, who was young, blonde, brooding, sold a lot of stories. That period was hard on Lola. This was a life of fame she never signed up for. She was accustomed to the usual private and quiet life, Yet she stayed for a long time, to Hollywood at least, through the gossip, through the distance, and through the emotional strain. But in the end, the cracks became too deep, and in 1985, they quietly divorced. No scandals, no public mudslinging, just two people who had drifted too far apart. The legendary actor doesn't like to talk about it, but you can still hear the ache in his voice whenever he does. He mentioned in one of his interviews how he regrets the pain his career brought to his family, also adding that balancing love and fame was one of the hardest things he ever had to do. So even though we all know Robert Redford as a legend, a heartthrob, a superstar, but he was also a man who felt deeply, who loved hard, but lost big. And what happened next? How his personal life unfolded after Lola might just surprise you even more. Keep watching. Goodbye, love. Hello, fame. The long shadows of loss. After his divorce with Lola Van Wagenen, Redford changed even more from a man who wanted a quiet life to someone who lived in motion. The 1970s were a whirlwind. It came with big films and bigger responsibilities. Robert Redford wasn't just acting anymore. He was evolving into a filmmaker, a visionary, and a quiet force behind the scenes. The man who once dreamed of a peaceful life in the mountains now lived in constant motion, constantly surrounded with film sets, meetings, global press tours. Basically, Hollywood wanted him everywhere, and Redford delivered. In 1972, a rugged, introspective Western, Jeremiah Johnson, was released. It wasn't just another role. For Redford, it was personal, a man escaping the world to live in solitude. That sure sounded familiar. Then, in 1973, came The Way We Were, a romantic drama, a cultural phenomenon. Starring opposite Barbra Streisand, Redford gave a performance that made hearts ache. The film became a classic, and he became something more than a star. He became an emotional icon. That same year, The Sting was released, a slick, stylish caper film that reunited him with Paul Newman. Audiences couldn't get enough. The film won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, and Redford received an Oscar nomination for Best Actor. Then, in 1976, came All the President's Men, a movie Redford produced himself. It was a serious, gripping political thriller about the Watergate scandal. Redford played journalist Bob Woodward. But this film was more than entertainment. It was a statement, a reminder that film could inform, challenge, and even shake the system. Year by year, his passion for serious storytelling was growing, and so was his desire to create something that lasted beyond the box office. This desire led him to make his directorial debut with Ordinary People in 1980, a quiet, devastating film about family, grief, and guilt. It won 4 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director for Redford. That was the turning point for Robert Redford. He proved to the whole world that he wasn't just a pretty face, but had a creative brain that could tell stories that mattered, stories that hurt alongside stories that healed. But through all this success, he was changing. Friends and colleagues saw it. He smiled less, stayed quieter, spent more time alone. There was something weighing on him. It became clear by the early 1980s. You could see it in his eyes, a heaviness. That was when he chose to turn his energy somewhere new. In 1981, Redford founded the Sundance Institute, an institute tucked away in the snowy mountains of Utah. Sundance wasn't just about the red carpets or awards. It was an environment that nurtured new voices, independent filmmakers, those with stories too raw or strange for Hollywood. Through his institute, he gave them a chance. The Sundance Film Festival followed. It was held first in 1985 and slowly became one of the most important festivals in the world. For many, Sundance was the beginning of careers, of movements, of recognition. But for Redford, it was also a source of healing. And yet, even in that peaceful place, grief still found him. In October 2020, tragedy struck again. His son, James Redford, age 58, passed away. Jamie had struggled with liver disease since childhood. He'd had 2 liver transplants by age 30, but this time, cancer came quickly and it took him. Jamie wasn't just Redford's child. He was his kindred spirit, a gentle filmmaker, a father, and an advocate who used film to fight for clean water, mental health, and compassion. Losing him broke something. Redford had lost a child before, his first son, Scott, in 1959. That grief had never left. But losing Jamie decades later was a second blow to the heart. Although he is older now, wiser, pain doesn't care about age. This time, Redford didn't rush back to work. He withdrew. He would spend long days walking, reflecting, and asking himself the hard questions. Through those times of heartbreak, of reflecting, and weighing decisions, something began to shift within him. A part of him slowly opened up again, a second chance and love. Because just when it seemed like his heart had gone quiet forever, someone new stepped into Redford's life. Someone that walked beside him in the new chapter of his life. Who was she? What changed? And how did Robert Redford, after all he had endured, learn to love again? Stay tuned to find out. A new love, a quiet life, and the ghosts of the past. Life does not come to a stop after heartbreak. At some point, it goes on quietly. For Robert Redford, it did so in 1996 from Sundance, Utah, that had been his creative and spiritual sanctuary. During that year, he met Sibylle Sagars, a Germany native multimedia artist. Sibylle was born in 1957 in Hamburg and adored nature, was intensely devoted to art projects, and due to her focus on nature, water, and global sustainability. Unlike many others who had come and gone through Redford's life, she wasn't starstruck. In fact, she didn't recognize him at all. To her, he wasn't the Sundance Kid or a Hollywood legend. He was simply Robert. That directness and straightforwardness appealed to Redford. Years of being admired for his fame had accustomed him to it. That honesty and simplicity stood out to Redford. After decades of being admired for his fame, he found her approach refreshing. She responded to his beliefs, not his persona. They began talking, spending more time together. Over time, their relationship had grown into something special. It was no whirlwind romance, no headlines or red carpet entrances. It was steady, based on shared values of art, nature, and simple living. By December of 1996, they were living together. They had a house in Sundance, out of the way from Hollywood, where Redford felt most like himself. For over a decade, they lived together in quiet obscurity. They traveled, worked together as artists, and created a life that was down to earth, deliberate, and off the radar. In July of 2009, after being together for 13 years, they married. Sibylle's hometown of Hamburg was where the wedding was held. It was private, no press, no paparazzi, just the two of them, their family, and close friends. Redford later spoke of Sibylle in quiet admiration. He described her as giving him a whole new life. He said she was a stabilizing influence, someone who gave him peace, stability, and a sense of shared purpose. Together, they supported each other. In 2015, Sibylle launched The Way of the Rain. Redford lent voice and presence to the mission, a non-profit organization that combines music, arts, and environmental education. He was a supporter for her passion for climate awareness and water conservation causes. Their work was based on no celebrity. It was established on creativity, respect, and shared purpose of leveraging art for great causes. When Redford grew old, he began to distance himself from Hollywood. He informed the public in 2018 that The Old Man and the Gun would be his last leading role. The film was a success critically. It was a thoughtful, subdued film, one which mirrored his own life in some way. After that, he stepped back from the spotlight. He made a surprise return in a brief cameo on AMC's Dark Winds in the early part of 2025 at the age of 88. It was small, but meaningful, a final respect for the art that he had dedicated more than 60 years of his life to. Still, privately, there was sorrow. As mentioned earlier in October 2020, Redford's son, James Redford, passed away due to liver cancer. Jamie, as he was later known, was Robert's son, but also his art partner and friend. A documentary director and environmentalist, Jamie produced documentaries that solve real problems of organ donation, mental illness, and clean energy. His death was an enormous loss for Redford. It recalled the memory of his past tragedy of losing his first child, Scott, in 1959 due to sudden infant death syndrome. Another unexpected consequence of Jamie's death was a quiet reconciliation with Lola Van Wegenen, his first wife. It was not romantic, but shared tragedy brought them together again as friends and parents who had endured the unthinkable twice. Sibylle approved of this reunification. She understood that brokenheartedness leaves room for old friendships. She never considered Lola a rival, but one who had traveled the same path. In recent years, those close to Redford report that he has shared more in private life. In one conversation, he reportedly shared a deeply personal reflection. It was here during this peaceful time in this latter part of his life with the love of Sibylle, although haunted by memories and loss, that the walls actually came crashing down. Inner Circles Close to the Star describes a personal emotional discussion, a confession. A long-suppressed fact finally surfaced at 88 years old. And what he confessed? It left all who heard it shocked. What was this bombshell confession? What did he admit about the love of his life? Before you think you know the answer, you need to hear this. It will leave you speechless. The shocking confession and the bittersweet truth of first love. It was neither an interview nor a press conference. It was just a quiet conversation that found its way to the public media. At 88 years old, Redford finally said what had remained unspoken for decades. This wasn't about his films. It wasn't about his awards or Hollywood. This time, it was about love, the kind that stayed with him, even after time, change, and distance. He spoke slowly, carefully, and then he said, "We grew up together. She was the love of my life." He was talking about his first wife, Lola Van Wegenen, the woman he married in 1958, the mother of his 4 children, and the one he built a life with long before anyone knew the name Robert Redford. This admission shocked those in the room, not because he had never loved again, but because of how deeply he still felt this bond, nearly 40 years after their divorce. And he didn't stop there. He took responsibility for the frictions their marriage had. "We didn't make it," he reportedly said, "and that's on me in a lot of ways." Coming from a man who spent a lifetime guarding his privacy, this kind of honesty was rare. It was real. One could hear the weight of years in his voice. He was not about comparing one woman to another, and surely wasn't dismissing Sibylle Sagars, his present wife, who has been his partner since 1996 and wife since 2009. Sources close to Redford were clear, saying his love and respect for Sibylle are genuine. They've built a life together rooted in peace, nature, and shared values. She brought him stability. She gave him purpose in later years. But his words about Lola revealed something deeper, something many people can relate to. That first love, the one born before success, before money, before public life, left an unshakable mark. Redford explained why. He called it pure. It came before everything else, he reportedly said. Before Hollywood, before expectations. It was just us, figuring life out. In interviews over the years, Redford rarely spoke about Lola, but in a 2001 Parade magazine interview, he called their marriage a big part of his life and said Lola was a great mother. He always spoke respectfully, but this recent conversation went deeper. It hinted that the emotional connection never fully disappeared. He said their love laid the foundation for everything that came after. It shaped who he was, how he saw the world, and what he valued. He acknowledged how their shared grief, especially after the death of their son James Redford in 2020, brought them closer again, not romantically, but in understanding. They had lived through things few others could understand. 2 parents who buried 2 sons, 2 people who shared a private history that no one else could ever fully grasp. This wasn't just a personal confession. It was a moment of reflection that speaks to something universal. It's easy to assume that with time, Old loves fade, but Redford's words show that some don't. Some stay, quietly, not interfering, not demanding, but simply present. This doesn't lessen the love we find later in life. It doesn't make current relationships weaker. It simply reminds us that the human heart is complicated, capable of holding more than one deep love, capable of cherishing the past without denying the present. At 88, Redford isn't chasing new fame. He's not trying to rewrite his legacy, but is simply telling the truth, a truth shaped by time, by loss, by decades of silence, and finally, by an honest confession. What do you think? Was Redford's confession surprising or deeply relatable? Let us know what you think in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You'll enjoy it